Hello everyone, back again with movie and tune recap. Today, I'm going to explain an American psychological thriller horror film from 2024, titled Don't Move. Spoilers ahead, so watch out and take care. The movie begins with distant screaming over the mountains as a woman named Iris wakes up from a nightmare. She grabs a pocket knife and a toy boat, before leaving her husband behind in bed. Iris drives to Massey Big Sur State Park, where she despondently places the toy boat at a makeshift memorial for her young son Mateo, who died there in an accidental fall during a family hiking trip. After carving her family's initials into a tree, Iris walks to a nearby cliff and prepares to jump. However, a man who identifies himself as Richard interrupts Iris' suicide attempt. Seeing her distress, Richard convinces her to reconsider by sharing a story about how he lost his daughter Chloe in a tragic car accident during an argument, which deeply traumatized him. He explains that he came to the park to clear his mind and cope with the loss, and his story helps Iris open up about Mateo's death and how it has affected her. After a heartfelt conversation, Iris changes her mind and follows Richard back to the parking lot. When they return to their cars, Richard suddenly takes a stun device from his vehicle, tases Iris, restrains her with zip ties, and drives away with her in the back seat. Iris wakes up to find Richard driving them to a remote cabin, and he tells her they'll be spending the entire weekend together. Panicked, she tries to use her smartwatch to call for help, but Richard informs her there is no cell service. He then reveals that she is not his first victim and shows her Mateo's toy boat. Quietly, Iris pulls out her pocket knife and begins cutting through her restraints. Once free, she attacks Richard with the knife, causing him to crash the car into a tree. They struggle and Iris nearly chokes him to death, but he manages to escape, and they both fall out of the vehicle. Iris cuts the restraints on her ankles and screams for help, but Richard tells her no one is around to hear her. He then cruelly taunts her, revealing that while she was unconscious, he injected her with a paralyzing agent that will gradually immobilize her body before shutting it down completely in 20 minutes. Iris runs into the forest with Richard calmly following behind, confident that the drug will soon take effect. As she moves deeper into the woods, she begins to feel one of her hands go numb. She quickly sets a 20-minute timer on her smartwatch and keeps moving, but her limbs are gradually failing. Eventually, she is forced to crawl, and desperate to escape, she hides as Richard draws closer. However, when ants begin swarming her, she is forced to emerge from hiding after Richard passes by. To get away, she crawls to a nearby stream and lets the rapids carry her downstream. Further along, she grabs onto a fallen tree, and using the last of her strength, pulls herself onto dry land. With only 10 minutes left, Iris crawls forward, gasping for breath, and as her body finally shuts down, the timer on her watch hits 0. Iris has landed on an isolated property belonging to an elderly man named Bill, who finds her while mowing his lawn. Unable to speak or move, Iris communicates by blinking, once for yes, twice for no, in response to his questions. Since Bill is too old to carry her, he gently loads her into a wheelbarrow and brings her inside to call 911. Just then, there's a knock at the door, and Iris quickly blinks a warning to make Bill wary of the person knocking. It turns out to be Richard, now introducing himself as Andrew, claiming he is searching for his injured wife who ran off after a car accident. Cautious but polite, Bill offers to help and proceeds to call 911. However, Richard steps inside uninvited, saying he needs to rest, while secretly scanning the house for Iris. When Bill threatens to call the police for entering without permission, Richard breaks down in fake tears, pretending to be confused and distressed. Moved by the display, Bill has a change of heart and offers to sit down and talk. He asks Richard to explain how his wife got lost, and instead of answering directly, Richard begins telling the story of his daughter's death. Unbeknownst to him, Iris is hiding beneath the couch, listening. In response, Bill shares his own painful memory, how his wife died of heart disease, and how he let his anger issues make things worse in her final days. At first, Bill isn't sure whether to believe Richard, but he grows suspicious, especially after Richard's phone rings, even though he claimed he had lost it. Realizing he is being lied to and that Richard is dangerous, Bill shoves him into a bookcase and grabs the phone to call 911.
But I'm pretty sure he means to hurt me.
I'm not gonna hurt you.
A violent struggle breaks out, and despite his age, Bill fiercely fights back, throwing Richard around and landing several hard hits. But the fight takes a dark turn when Richard grabs a knife and stabs Bill in the leg. As Bill collapses, Richard viciously stabs him multiple times, killing him. With the authorities on their way, Richard douses the cabin in petrol and sets it on fire to cover his tracks. He then takes Bill's truck and prepares to leave, unaware that Iris, who has started regaining feeling in her hands, is still inside, and she manages to tug on a blind cord, drawing Richard's attention. Realizing she's still alive, Richard goes back into the burning cabin, carries Iris out, and drives away with her in Bill's truck, just as emergency responders race toward the now flaming house. While driving away, Richard receives a phone call from his other daughter, who excitedly tells him about her good report card. She also mentions that she and her mother, Lizzie, will be visiting the cabin that weekend. After passing the phone to her mother, Richard and Lizzie argue about his family coming to the cabin. Eventually, Richard gives in and Lizzie says they'll see him at 10 o'clock, unintentionally foiling his plans for Iris. Running low on fuel, Richard stops at a service station to refuel. While he is inside the store, Iris, who is gradually recovering from paralysis, removes her seatbelt and tries to open the truck's door, but fails. However, she manages to attract the attention of a young boy and his mother. Though they don't interact directly, the mother becomes concerned. Richard notices the subtle commotion, quickly fuels up and drives off, and suspicious, the mother reports Richard's vehicle to the authorities. Richard returns to his wrecked car to collect a change of clothes, more zip ties, and a vial of paralytic. As he begins attaching straps to tow his car, California Highway Patrol Officer Dontrell Carter arrives, responding to the call from the gas station. Officer Dontrell asks what is going on, and Richard claims that his wife crashed the car while drunk, but the officer is skeptical.
That she was alone, as far as I know.
Meanwhile, Iris manages to lower the truck window, catching Dontrell's attention. When she mouths "help me," Richard suddenly attacks, beating the officer to death with a heavy towing cable hook. He then hides the body in the police car and sets it on fire, and unbeknownst to him, Iris has secretly taken the vial of paralytic. Iris begins regaining some of her faculties as Richard drives them away from the scene, now armed with the cop's gun. She tries to get into Richard's head by bringing up the death of his first daughter, calling him broken. This angers Richard, and he brings Iris to a pier. Suddenly, Iris stabs Richard with a syringe filled with paralytic, but she isn't yet strong enough to push down the plunger. She asks Richard why he didn't just let her die at the cliff, but he reminds her that she made that decision. Richard argues that her experience with him has given her a new appreciation for life, and then, he takes a fish knife from the truck. Richard takes Iris to a small boat jetty, intending to row her onto the lake where he has already dumped the bodies of his previous victims. Seeing the gun and knife, Iris begins to fake cry, tricking him into lowering his guard. Seizing the opportunity, she grabs the fish knife and stabs Richard through the throat, and pushes him overboard. As Richard tries to climb back onto the boat, Iris grabs the gun and shoots him, accidentally piercing the hull of the boat in the process. Wounded, Richard dives into the water and swims away. Damaged by Iris's gunfire, the rowboat begins to sink. She tries to get up but can't. Holding her breath, Iris goes under as the boat submerges, but she manages to resurface. With much of her body restored to normal, she swims back to the pier. Seeing that the injured Richard has also made it to shore several yards away, Iris approaches him. She thanks him, because in her struggle to escape him, she has rediscovered the will to live. The movie ends with Iris walking away, leaving Richard to die slowly from his gruesome injuries. Okay guys, that's all the recap about Don't Move from 2024. Thanks for watching, see you again in the next video.